The sound of a mine roof giving way isn't a crash. It's a sigh. It's the sound of the earth exhaling, tired of holding its breath. Caleb knew that sound. He felt the pressure change in his ears before the first rock fell, as the lights on the continuous miner flickered and died, plunging Section 4 into a darkness thicker than ink. Caleb didn't think about the call. He didn't think about the paycheck. He looked at the kid, Boyd, standing paralyzed near the rib, and realized that the promise he made to the boy's mother was about to be tested in the dark. The alarm clock didn't ring. It didn't have to. Caleb Vance had been waking up at 3:30 a.m. for 30 years, his internal clock set to the rhythm of the shift work. Outside, the world was still pitch black, the kind of darkness that felt thin and breathable, unlike the heavy, suffocating blackness waiting for him 600 feet underground. He sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the house settle. Beside him, his wife Martha breathed in a soft, rhythmic whistle. He watched the rise and fall of her shoulder for a moment, grounding himself. This was the reason. The warmth of the quilt, the roof over their heads, the grandbabies that came over on Sundays. Caleb stood up, his knees popping with a sound like dry twigs snapping. He rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the grit that never seemed to truly wash out of his pores. It was ingrained in the lines of his forehead, a permanent tattoo of the trade. He moved to the kitchen, the floorboards cool under his calloused feet. The coffee pot was already set. He pressed the button and watched the dark liquid drip, agonizingly slow. While it brewed, he looked out the window, toward the silhouette of the ridge. The mountains of West Virginia were beautiful in the daylight, rolling green waves that hid the scars of industry. But at night, they looked like sleeping giants, indifferent to the men digging in their bellies. He packed his bucket, a bologna sandwich on white bread, an apple, a thermos of black coffee, and a moon pie. The same lunch since 1994. Routine was safety. Routine kept you sharp. If you changed the routine, you invited bad luck, or so the old-timers used to say. Caleb wasn't superstitious, but he wasn't reckless either. The drive to the mine was quiet. The headlights cut through the thick mountain fog that clung to the hollows. He passed other trucks, mostly Fords and Chevys, rusty around the wheel wells, all heading to the same place. The brotherhood of the road. A nod of the head as they passed was all the communication needed. The locker room, or the bathhouse, smelled of sulfur, damp, concrete, and stale sweat. It was the smell of labor. Men were already there, changing out of their street clothes and into their blues and grays, their boots heavy with steel toes and metatarsal guards. "Morning, Caleb," a voice called out. It was distinctively young, cracking slightly at the end. Caleb turned to see Boyd. The kid was 22, fresh-faced, with eyes that were still too bright for this line of work. He was the nephew of a friend, and Caleb had taken him under his wing. In the mines, a greenhorn needed a mentor, or he became a liability. "Morning, Boyd," Caleb grunted, lacing his boots. "You check your light." "Charge and ready," Boyd said, tapping the battery pack on his belt. "How's the back today?" "It's attached to my ass." "Same as yesterday," Caleb said, earning a chuckle from the men nearby. Humor was the grease that kept the gears turning. You couldn't dwell on the aches, or you'd never walk out the door. They moved to the lamp room, grabbing their brass checks. This was the ritual. You take your brass tag, you hang it on the board before you go down. If the tag is on the board, you're in the hole. If something happens, that board is the Bible. It tells the rescuers who to look for. Caleb hung his tag number 409. Boyd hung his number 8. They walked to the elevator. The cage. It was a rattletrap metal box that descended into the throat of the earth. As they piled in, shoulder to shoulder, the laughter died down. A solemnity took over. The cage jerked, the chains rattled, and the floor dropped out from under them. The descent was fast. The air temperature shifted, becoming cool and damp. The smell changed instantly. It was the smell of ancient dust, of rock that hadn't seen the sun in 300 million years. It tasted metallic on the tongue. When the cage hit the bottom, the gates opened to the main line. The Mantrip, a low riding rail car, was waiting to take them 3 miles back to the face. The walls of the tunnel were painted white, with rock dust to suppress the explosive coal dust. It looked like a tunnel carved through a skeleton. "All right, boys," the section foreman, a hard-nosed man named Miller, shouted over the hum of the ventilation fans. "We're in Section 4 today. Retreat mining. We're pulling pillars. Watch the roof, watch the ribs, and watch each other." Retreat mining. The most dangerous game in the business. You dig your way in, creating a grid of pillars to hold the roof up. Then, on the way out, you mine those pillars, letting the roof collapse behind you in a controlled crash. It was efficient, but it was flirting with disaster. As the Muntrip rattled along the tracks, Caleb's mind drifted. It was a trick he had learned years ago to deal with the claustrophobia. He thought about the bills sitting on the kitchen counter. The transmission on the truck was slipping. Martha needed that dental work done. People on the outside, the ones who wrote articles in big city papers, they always asked, "Why? Why do you go down there? Why don't you move? Why don't you learn to code?" They didn't understand the gravity of the place. It wasn't just about the money, though the money was the only thing keeping the wolves from the door. It was about heritage. Caleb's father had died with black lung. His grandfather had died in a rockfall in 48. The coldness was in his DNA. There was a pride in powering the country, in doing the hard, dirty work that kept the lights on in skyscrapers 1,000 miles away. He looked at Boyd. The kid was staring at the ceiling of the tunnel, watching the rock bolts flash by. Boyd wanted to save up for college. He wanted to be an engineer. Just 2 years. Boyd Ad-Said. "I'll work 2 years, save every dime, and get out." Caleb had said the same thing in 1995. The money traps you, the lifestyle traps you. You buy a truck, you buy a house, you have a kid, and suddenly the mine owns you. "Hey," Caleb nudged Boyd, shouting over the screech of the wheels. "Keep your head down when we get off. The seam gets low in Section 4. Don't want to scalp yourself." Boyd nodded, his face pale in the light of his cap lamp. "You think the roof is stable back there, Caleb?" "Miller said the strata is shifting. The roof is never stable, son," Caleb said, his voice calm. "It's rock. It wants to fall. We just convince it to wait until we're gone. You listen to the timber. You listen to the bolts. If they start singing, we move. Simple as that." They arrived at the section. The ceiling here was only 48 inches high. 4 feet. You couldn't stand up. You walked in a crouch, or you crawled. The machinery was low profile, looking like flat, armored beetles. The noise began. The continuous miner, a massive machine with a rotating drum of steel teeth, roared to life. It tore into the face of the coal seam, ripping black gold from the earth. The sound was deafening, a physical force that vibrated your teeth. Water sprays hissed, trying to knock down the dust, but the air was still thick with it. It coated your safety glasses, clogged your nose, tasted like copper and old earth. Caleb took his position, operating the shuttle car. He drove the load from the miner to the belt line, back and forth, back and forth. Hours passed. The monotony was the enemy. You had to stay alert, but the repetition lulled you. Load, reverse, dump, forward load. Caleb checked his watch. 10 a.m., lunch in 2 hours. He thought about the bologna sandwich. He thought about the sun shining on the river. He wondered if Martha had remembered to call the mechanic. Suddenly, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. A drop in pressure. The air suddenly felt heavier, pushing against his eardrum. The rats usually seen scurrying near the waist. Piles were gone. Caleb hit the brake on the shuttle car. He killed the engine. "Kill it!" Kalen screamed into his radio. "Miller, kill the miner!" The roar of the cutter head died down. The sudden silence was terrifying. "What is it, Vance?" Miller's voice crackled over the radio. "Listen," Caleb whispered, though he wasn't on the radio anymore. Ping, a sharp, high-pitched, metallic sound. It came from the roof. It was a roof bolt snapping under immense tension. Ping, pop. Then A low groan. Deep within the mountain, the strata was shifting. The pillars they were robbing were giving way too fast. "Everybody out!" Miller screamed. "Evacuation! Now! Move! Move!" Chaos erupted. But it was controlled chaos. These men drilled for this. They didn't run you. Can't run in a 4-foot crouch. Scotland, moving fast and low like crabs. "Boyd!" Caleb yelled, turning his cap lamp to find the kid. Boyd was freezing. He was staring at a crack forming in the roof, a jagged lightning bolt of darkness spreading across the gray stone. Caleb grabbed Boyd by the back of his belt and yanked him hard. "Move, boy! Don't look at it." They scrambled toward the Montreb. The ground shook violently, knocking them to their knees. Coal spalled off the ribs, exploding like shrapnel. Dust billowed up, instant and blinding. Boom! The sound was like a bomb going off inside a drum. The concussion wave hit them, knocking the wind out of Caleb's lungs. The main airway, behind them, collapsed. The wind, which usually blew a steady breeze, stopped dead. "The intake," someone yelled. "The intake is blocked." "Go to the secondary," Miller commanded. They turned, heading for the secondary escapeway, but the mountain wasn't done. The floor heaved up the floor heave. They called it where the pressure from the walls forces the floor to buckle. Caleb and Boyd were lagging behind, Caleb pushing the younger man forward. They were 50 yards from the others when the roof directly above the intersection gave way. It wasn't a slow crumble. It was a slam. A slab of sandstone the size of a school bus detached and fell. Caleb tackled Boyd, throwing them both into a small cross-cut alcove, just as the world ended. The noise was absolute, a roaring, grinding, tearing sound that felt like it was ripping Caleb's skull apart. Then the dust hit, a wall of black powder that filled the nose, the mouth, the eyes, and then silence. Absolute, heavy, crushing silence. Caleb coughed, hacking up dust. He reached up and touched his helmet. The light was gone. Smashed. "Boyd!" he croaked. The darkness was total. You couldn't see your hand if you pressed it against your eyeball. This was the darkness of the tomb. "Caleb," Boyd's voice was high, trembling, on the verge of a scream. "I can't see. I can't see!" "Stay put," Caleb said, forcing his voice to be steady, though his own heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Don't move. You'll disorient yourself." Caleb fumbled at his belt. He found his backup light, a small handheld spotter. He clicked it on. The beam cut through the dust like a light. It revealed a wall of rubble not 3 feet from them. The intersection was gone. The way forward was blocked. Caleb turned the light around. Behind them, another pile of rubble. They were in a pocket. A section of tunnel maybe 20 feet long, sealed at both ends. "Oh, God," Boyd whispered, curling into a ball against the cold rib. "We're buried. We're buried alive." "Stop that," Caleb snapped. He didn't mean to be harsh, but panic consumed oxygen. Panic killed. "Check your self-rescuer." "Is it damaged?" Boyd fumbled with the metal canister on his belt. I think it's okay." "Good, don't open it yet. The air is still okay for now. If you smell almonds or rotten eggs, you pop that seal immediately. You hear me?" Yeah, I hear you." Caleb swept the light over the enclosure. They were trapped in a space about 4 feet high, 10 feet wide, and 20 feet long. The roof above them was holding, but for how long? He sat down heavily on the floor, the dust puffing up around him. He looked at his watch. 10:14 a.m. It had only been 14 minutes since he was thinking about his sandwich. Now, he was thinking about how much air was left in this pocket. Time in the dark doesn't move in a line. It moves in circles. Caleb turned the light off to save the battery. The darkness returned, heavy and oppressive. He could hear Boyd's breathe in fast, shallow gasps. "Slow your breath, Boyd," Caleb said softly. "In through the nose, out through the mouth. Count 2-4. My mom, Boyd whimpered. She told me not to take this shift. She had a dream about a black dog. She said it was an omen. Dreams are just dreams, son. Focus on right now. You hurt my ankle. I think I twisted it when you tackled me, but I can move it. Good. You're good. They sat in silence for what felt like an hour. Caleb's mind began to wander. He thought of the safety training videos. Stay calm. Signal if you can. Conserve air. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrench. He kept there. He crawled to the metal water pipe that ran along the roof. Miraculously, a section of it was still intact, disappearing into the rubble. Clang, clang, clang. He struck the pipe 3 times. Hard. He waited. Silence. Clang, clang, clang. Sound carries through metal. If the pipe wasn't severed too far down, maybe someone on the other side would hear it. Do you think they know? Boyd asked. They know, Caleb said. Miller got out. I saw him clear the break. He's already calling mine rescue. They're coming. It's deep, Caleb. We're 3 miles in. I've seen rescue teams dig through worse than this to get a cat out of a well. They ain't leaving us. Caleb lied. He knew the reality. If the roof was still working, if the methane levels rose, the rescue team wouldn't be allowed in. It was too dangerous. They might be waiting for the mountain to stop moving before they even started digging. Caleb's chest felt tight. The air was getting stale. Carbon dioxide was building up. It would make them sleepy first, then a headache, then unconsciousness. It wasn't a bad way to go, compared to the alternative. Tell me something, Caleb Boyd said, his voice sounding thick. Tell me about your boat. Caleb smiled in the dark. He had been talking about buying a bass boat for 10 years. The Ranger? Oh, she's a beauty. Sparkles blue in the sun. 200 horsepower Yamaha on the back. Gets you across the lake before you can blink. Where are you gonna take it? Sutton Lake? Maybe Stonewall Jackson? Gonna take Martha out? She pretends she hates fishing, but she likes the sun on her face. She likes to read while I cast. Caleb described the boat in detail. The upholstery. The trolling motor. He described the sound of the water lapping against the hull. He painted a picture of a world full of light and air and space. As he talked, he felt the headache starting. A dull throb behind the eyes. Boyd? Yeah? Boyd's voice was slower now, slurring slightly. Put your rescuer on. Now, I don't think I can get the clips. Kayla clicked the light back on. Boyd was slumped against the wall, his eyes drooping. The bad air was hitting him faster because of his panic. Caleb crawled over. His own limbs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. He grabbed Boyd's canister, popped the seal, and pulled out the breathing apparatus. He shoved the mouthpiece into Boyd's mouth and clipped the nose plug shut. Breathe, Caleb commanded. Boyd took a ragged breath. The chemical reaction in the rescuer would generate oxygen, but it got hot. It would burn his mouth. It's gonna burn, Caleb said. That means it's working. Caleb looked at his own rescuer. He had one, but if he put it on, he couldn't talk. He couldn't keep Boyd calm, and he couldn't bang on the pipe. He decided to wait. Just a little longer. He picked up the wrench. His arm felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Clang! 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 He closed his eyes. In the darkness, he saw his kitchen. He saw the bill on the counter. He saw Martha turning to look at him, smiling. I'm sorry, Martha, he thought. I shouldn't have taken the overtime. He swung the wrench again. Clang! Clang! His grip failed. The wrench slipped from his hand and clattered onto the rock floor. He slumped back against the coal. The air was thick, hot, and soupy. He was hallucinating now. He saw a canary fluttering near the roof, a bright yellow bird, glowing in the dark. Sing for me, he thought. If you're singing, "There's air." The canary didn't sing. It just watched him with black bead-like eyes. "Caleb ... double quotes," Boyd mumbled around the mouthpiece. "She," Caleb whispered. "Save your air." I'm just gonna rest my eyes." The darkness swirled. Caleb felt himself drifting away, floating down a dark river. It was peaceful. The pain in his back was gone. The worry about the money was gone. Is this it? He wondered. Is this the end of the shift? Then he felt it. A vibration. Not from the roof. Not from the floor, from Tepeep. He forced his eyes open. He pressed his ear against the cold metal. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint. Distant. But it was rhythmic. It was human. Adrenaline spiked through his system, clearing the fog for a second. He groped for the wrench. He couldn't find it. He grabbed a piece of slate rock instead. He smashed it against the pipe. Bang, 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 he waited. Tap, 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 Boyd. Caleb rasped, shaking the boy's shoulder. "Boyd! They're there!" "They hear us." Boyd's eyes opened wide above the mouthpiece. Tears streamed down Caleb's face, mixing with the cold dust, creating muddy tracks on his cheeks. He wasn't forgotten. The Brotherhood was on the other side of that rock. The next 3 hours were the longest of Caleb's life. The tapping kept them sane. It was a lifeline, a Morse code of hope. Then came the sound of the drill. It started as a low hum, then grew to a high-pitched whine. They were drilling a probe hole. When the drill bit finally punched through the rubble wall, a blast of fresh air hissed into their pocket. It smelled like diesel and sweat and men, and it was the sweetest perfume Caleb had ever smelled. "Vance, Boyd," a voice shouted through the small hole. "We're here!" Caleb croaked. "We're here!" "Boyd is hurt, but alive. Hang tight, brothers. We're coming through. We're moving the rock now." It took another hour for the rescue team to clear enough debris to crawl through. When the beam of a fresh cap lamp cut through the dark, blinding Caleb, he didn't look away. A rescuer in a full face mask crawled in. He checked Boyd first, hooking him up to a fresh air line. Then he turned to Caleb. "You look like hell." "Caleb," the rescuer said. It was Miller. The foreman had come back in with the team. "You're no beauty queen yourself, Miller," Caleb whispered. They dragged them out. They put Boyd on a stretcher. Caleb refused it. He insisted on walking, though he leaned heavily on Miller's shoulder. The journey out was a blur. The man-trip ride. The smell of the main intake. The rattling of the cage as it ascended. When the cage surfaced, the light was blinding. It was late afternoon. The sun was dipping low over the ridges, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. People were waiting. Wives? Mothers? Ambulances? Martha was there. She broke through the line of safety men, running toward the gate. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. Caleb stepped off the cage. His legs buckled, but he didn't fall. Martha collided with him, burying her face in his filthy, coal-stained chest. She didn't care about the dirt. "I told you," she sobbed. "I told you to be careful." "I was," Caleb whispered into her hair. "I was." He looked over at the stretcher. Boyd was being loaded into the ambulance. The kid pulled the mask off his face and looked at Caleb. He gave a weak thumbs up. Caleb nodded. He took a deep breath of the mountain air. It tasted of pine needles and damp earth and exhaust fumes. It tasted like life. Caleb Vance never went back underground. The doctor said his lungs had taken enough, and the trauma of the entrapment had done a number on his heart. He took his pension early. It wasn't as much as he wanted, but it was enough. He bought the boat, a used one, not the new Ranger, but it floated just fine. 6 months later, he sat on the water at Sutton Lake. The line was cast out, bobbing gently on the ripples. Martha was beside him, reading a paperback novel. The sun was warm on his neck. He closed his eyes and listened. He didn't hear the roar of the continuous miner. He didn't hear the groan of the shifting roof. He heard the wind in the trees. He heard a cardinal singing from the shore. He looked at his hands. The cold dust was gone from the surface, scrubbed away by fervent washing. But if you looked close, deep in the creases of his knuckles, the black marks remained. The mountain had let him go, but it had left its mark. Caleb reeled in his line, checked the bait, and cast it out again. "You okay, old man?" Martha asked, looking over her sunglasses. Caleb smiled, watching the bobber dance. "Yeah," he said. "I'm out. I'm finally out." He was one of the lucky ones. For every man who walked out of the cage, the mountain kept a memory of the ones who didn't. But today, the sun was shining. The air was sweet, and Caleb Vance was breathing it. And that was enough.